Welcome to the Black Bibliophile podcast. The Black Bibliophile is a podcast where I, Jazz, read and talk about popular and little-known books, comics, zines, and authors. To quote Haruki Murakami, "If you only read the books that everyone else is reading, you can only think what everyone else is thinking." And with that, let's start the show.
Welcome to the Black Bibliophile. It's me, Jazz, your host, and this week we're talking about the Song of Blood and Stone, the Earthsinger Chronicles, book number 1 by Penelope. Now, this isn't the first time I've reviewed this book, but I decided to review it for the podcast because St. Martin's Press was so gracious to offer to send me a review copy of the second book of the Earthsinger Chronicles. So I thought, what better than to brush up on the first book and then dive into the second book. So let's read the summary of this first book. But also, if you want to check out my previous review, you can go on womenwriteaboutcomics.com and it should be there under my name, Jasmine Joyner. But I'll also leave a link in the show notes. So let's get into this summary. The Song of Blood and Stone by Penelope. The kingdoms of Olestra and Langamar have been separated for centuries by the Mantle, a magical veil that has enforced the tumultuous peace between the two lands. But now the Mantle is cracking, and the true father, ruler of Langamar, and the most powerful Earthsinger in the world, finally sees a way to Olestra to seize power. All Jasminda wanted was to live quietly on her farm, away from the prying eyes of those in the nearby town. Branded an outcast by the color of her skin and gift of earth song, she's been shunned all her life and has learned to steer clear from the townsfolk until a group of Langamari soldiers wander into her valley with an Olestrian spy, believing they're still in Langamar. Through Jack the spy, Jasminda learns that the Mantle is weakening, allowing people to slip through without notice. And even more troubling, Langamar is mobilizing, and if no one finds a way to restore the Mantle, it might be too late for Olestra. Their only hope lies uncovering the secrets of the Queen who sleeps, and Jasminda's Earth Song is the key to unravel them. Thrust into a hostile society and a world she doesn't know, Jasminda and Jack race to unveil an ancient mystery that might offer salvation. So, it took me a while to review this book. If you haven't noticed, the podcast has been MIA for about 2 weeks. I suffer from chronic illness, a little personal moment before I jump into my review of the book. So my chronic illness sometimes appears rather suddenly and leaves me bedridden for most of the time days, but this has been weeks of me being sick on and off, and it's been frustrating to say the least. So I really appreciate those who, waited patiently. And so let's talk about the Song of Blood and Stone. Also, not to get confused by the book called The Song of Blood and Stone. This is the song of, I got it backwards, but you know what I mean. Penelope's book. I reviewed this book about a year ago, and I really focused on the romance aspect. I've never really read a romance fantasy book in the history of my life. So I was like, oh, this sounds like something interesting. Let me check it out. So I was also given a review copy from St. Martin's Press through Women Write About Comics' sister site, bookmark.com. And I read that copy. Loved the book, loved the romance centered at it, and was truly interested in to read what Penelope had next in the next book. Now, a year later, I'm rereading the book, and I don't know. The first time I read it, I did like the book. I guess I didn't pick up on some of the inconsistencies that I'm picking up now. So Jasminda is born of both lands. Her dad is a refugee from Langamar, and her mother is a part of this sisterhood. They're like nuns who work to help the refugees find a better life in Olestra. So her mother, who is a white, the Olestrians are white with red hair and like golden eyes, and the Langamarians are black with thick curly hair, and so you get what I'm saying. They're dark skinned. So her mother fell in love with her father, was shunned from her family, and they went off and found this wonderful valley and hid away, and she had 3 kids. She had Jasminda, who is dark-skinned like her father, looks Langamari, and then the twins, her 2 younger brothers, who look just like their mother. They pass. They're white passing. And before the book started, the book starts with Jasminda in town trying to gather supplies and get out of there before the encroaching storm comes and halts. Like, she's trying to get home before the storm comes, because her way home is through the valley, through the mountains, and basically directly into the storm. So she's trying to grab all her stuff and get out of town. So Jasminda's, before this trip though, before the book starts, she loses her father and her brothers to one of the storms. So she's really one of the storms. They went into the mountains and never came back, and she is basically the only person left in her family, and she's alone at the farm, and all she has left is that farm. And we find out when she's in town that the farm has been put up for auction because it was discovered at some point that their land had never been subjected to taxes, so they had back taxes, and she had thousands and thousands of dollars due back taxes, and she was being threatened to lose her land, even though it really wasn't valuable to anyone until this random moment. So she goes to the post office. Everybody gives her flack because she's black and everybody's white and they don't like her. And also people with dark skin have the power of Earthsong, which in this book is considered basically witchcraft. You have access to witchcraft. That means they can shake the ground, control the winds, pull the moisture out of the air. Just think like Avatar Last Airbender, but they have all those powers and they can control them, but they cannot use Earthsong to kill other people. They can indirectly kill people, but they cannot directly kill people. Like an earthquake can happen and a crack can open into the ground and they can suck in a whole town, subsequently killing people, but they cannot like directly rip somebody's skin off their bodies. So that's Earthsong. So Jasminda's treated like an outcast. She's the only member aside from her father who could use Earthsongs. Her brothers were born silent, meaning they had no access to the power. And she's at the post office dealing with this rude lady, and she gets a letter from her grandfather saying he will give her basically the exact amount to buy her farm back from the government and pay her back taxes if she rescinds her birthright. Says that she is not her mother's daughter because her grandfather is trying to run for politics, and it will look really bad if his oldest daughter, who he said died in a fever or something, happened to run off with a Langamari man and gave birth to what they call, quotation marks, half-breed children. So she gets this letter, she calls him, and he's like, sign it. I'm not talking to you about it. Sign this, or, pay the consequences, or you'll lose your land, you'll lose everything. You really have no choice. And so then she's left with this horrible thing to disown her parentage and lose her last piece of her family, the cabin and the land, the cabin her father built with his hands and the land she grew up on. So she goes home, and on her way home, she stumbles upon a hurt Olestrian soldier, Jack, who's like running from Langamari soldiers in the mountains. And at first she doesn't believe him, and at first he still thinks he's in Langamar because he sees her, and of course she looks Langamarian even though she is an Olestrian, and they are over the mantle, over the border. And hilarity ensues, I guess. I don't want to recap the whole book, but I will be providing spoilers throughout my review of the book because I can't help it. The relationship between Jack and Jasminda kind of develops really fast. It's like Jasminda has never seen a man, which aside from her brothers and her father, and now that she hasn't really come in contact with anyone, she's like, ooh, a man. He might be dirty and broken, but he's kind of hot. And he looks at her like, ooh, she's cute. And she uses her Earthsong to ease his pain, and it causes this warm feeling to go all over his body. And he's like, if I were to die, this would be cool because she's pretty and her Earthsong feels dope. So they already vibe immediately. And at first the first time I read this, I was like, ooh, romance novel feels, And now I read it and I'm like, it's just, they literally just met and it was just like, bam, you're hot. Let's do this. When Jasminda has a natural aversion to all Olestrians, especially soldiers, because they treat Langamari people terribly. They call them grolls, which I assume is a racial slur, but is never really told the definition of the racial slur, which I found an issue with. Like, I wish Penelope went into more depth about little facts about the world like that. Like, what does a groll mean? Where did that term come from? Why is it so offensive? Like, obviously it's offensive to be called something outside of your name, but what specifically is the history of this slur towards Langamari people? So I thought it was kind of odd that Jasminda was immediately taken in to Jack's looks and stuff. She was also mildly annoyed and intrigued by him because he spoke the Langamar language when no Olestrian should be able to do that, because they don't care and they wouldn't stoop to that level. So anyways, she doesn't believe Jack. She tries to heal his wounds, but then she sees the Langamari soldiers coming around the curve and she's like, crap. And they drag him off and beat him up and ruin all the healing she'd already put into him. And she climbs over the rock and goes to a shortcut to get back to her valley, because where they're carrying him off to is her valley. She barely makes it there and meets them holding her father's shotgun on her porch, like, what's good? What is going on here? What's happening? And because because the soldiers and Jack both don't know that they have crossed the mantle and that they're actually in Olestra, they just see her as a woman with no husband at a house, a very secluded place, and decide, we're still in Langamar and you should respect the true father and don't go against his orders and house us for the night. So, weighing the pros with the cons, she does that. They strap him to the porch, Jack, the soldier, and she feeds them and tries to fight off the main captain's advances because they're all a little rapey. So all this ensues. A lot of stuff happens. I'm going to try not to go into detail, but let's talk about the main points of the story. So the whole story hinges on these two characters, the true father and the queen who speaks. And when the queen who sleeps, when the queen who sleeps awakens, then she will restore peace to the land, basically. And after, dodging the soldiers, burning down her house, blah, 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 spoiler alerts abound, they end up with this secret guard, the keepers. Like, everything feels like it's very, the plotting of the story feels very like, oh, and this happens, and this happens. There's no real foundation. It just feels like stuff just happens and we just go along with it. Not to say I'm not into it. It's mostly hinged on Jasminda's and Jack's relationship. Like, the whole story hinges on that, literally, figuratively, emotionally. All of it hinges on them. And some part of me is like, oh, this is really cool. And other parts of me are like, I just want more space. It feels very claustrophobic to just focus on these two characters and focus on the true father and the queen who sleeps the entire time, because I want to know more about the world. I want to know more about Yili. There's like other nations other than Langamar and Olestra, and I want to know, what do those nations think about all the tomfoolery happening between these two? There have been like 5 wars. There have been just complete decimation, and I'm just interested in more on the world. And I understand this is an introduction, and maybe the second book does tell me more. I purposefully didn't pick up the second book the minute I finished the first one, because I wanted to give a review that was based solely on the interpretation of the world, the Earthsinger Chronicles world within the first book. So yeah, I'm going to pick up the second book like after I record this. But Jasminda's character is portrayed as fierce, loyal, and a fighter. she was going to fight for her land. Like, her main goal was to fight for her land until she met Jack. And immediately from the 2 to 3 days Jack was tied to her porch and she was hosting those soldiers, they kind of fell in love. It was quick, fast. She took off his shirt and she was like, that's hot. And then they, vibed real hard. And I thought that was just so rushed because they didn't talk a lot. It was more about survival, but maybe it was like the Sookie Stackhouse syndrome. I don't know if you guys have read the True Blood novels. You should. They're great and also terrible at the same time. If you like reading good trash, it's not a guilty pleasure because I'm not guilty about it, but if you like good trash, you should check those books out because they are good, but also not good at the same time. That's the best way I can explain it. But anyways, it's like the Sookie Stackhouse syndrome where Sookie would just fall in love with the first dude that saved her, but it's in reverse because Jasminda saved Jack and he was like, she's hot or whatever, let's get married. And you're like, whoa, hey, whoa, wow, your heart throbs for her immediately, and I am very confused. So blah blah blah, they run off together. He's very protective of her from the minute he meets her, and their love is just very intense. And Jasminda, we get to this trope with Jasminda where they're alone at night and they're aching for one another, and he's like, oh no, I don't want to taint you because she's a virgin and you can't taint a virgin. I was like, are you serious? She hasn't looked at another dude in her whole 19 years of living. She's been that limited that she's just has to stay pure or some wildness. So I didn't like that whole purity thing that was held up. I was like, that's kind of lame and unnecessary. She's so fierce in all other parts and she doesn't care what people think of her because she can't care what people think of her because everybody hates her. So she just has to be her most unique and vibrant self at all times, because who the hell cares? They're going to hate her anyway because she's black. So it was wild to me to think that, so she's just never had a crush and she's this untouched, sullied woman, which is fair and unfair because in Olestra, again, she's considered gross. Nobody wants to touch her because she is dark-skinned, black Lingamari. And I get that, but at the same time, I'm like, not everybody in Olestra hated the Lingamari. She could have, even in her small town, made out with a dude or something. Anyways, Jack was her first in everything, and I thought that was weird, and she became this weird, timid person when she was never that. But then once, he introduced her to sex, it was all guns a-blazing from there. So what am I to say? I just don't like the unsullied virgin trope. I wish that wasn't there, but you know what? She wasn't unsullied for a long time. She was very sullied for 2 chapters after that. So, major spoiler alerts coming. Major spoiler alerts coming. Major spoiler alerts coming. Please stop listening if you want to read this book, which, let me sum it up. You should read this book. It's a good book. It's a good intro into the Earthsinger Chronicles, and I do recommend it. Now, to my spoilers. So, in the caverns, after they ran from her house and after she burned it down and all of these things, Jasminda and Jack find the keepers, who are a group of people who are tasked to keep the caldera, which is a stone that if Jasminda touches it, she is immediately transported into memories of who we find out is the queen who sleeps. So she's immediately transported into the memories of the queen who sleeps, which this caldera that the keepers hold is supposed to give them insight into how to defeat the true father. So the story goes that a long time ago, the Earthsingers and the Silent, the people who don't sing, so the Langamari and the Olestrians lived in peace, and the queen who sleeps, her name was Ula, and her twin brother Eros were very close. Ula, dark skin, long, looked just like Jasminda, and her had a twin, Eros. He looked like Jack, so they were like black white twins, and she had powers and he didn't, and he was jealous of her powers. So she then found her boyfriend helped find a spell that she could gift him a little bit of seeing powers. He of course abused the powers and then became evil, and then it started a war and blah blah blah. He's the true father, she's the queen who sleeps. I mean, it's not hard to guess. It's kind of predictable what happens, which is also a problem with this book, is like the plot is pretty predictable. The book only surprises me. It doesn't surprise me. Everything's like low key predictable, except the way Jasminda buys back her farm. I did not predict that, and I did forget a lot of the details from last year when I read it. But yeah, the book is good. I just found it to be super predictable, but that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's still a good story, and the world she weaves, Penelope weaves, I just want more of it. I just want more details, more in depth. We only get a glimpse at Lingamar in like the destruction and the pain and the agony the true father causes over there, and through his soldiers' actions when they're held up at Jasminda's house. Like, they were trying to rape Jasminda and they were trying to rape Jack, and I was like, damn, they're really just going to go at it with everybody and lay waste wherever they can do. And so that reflects on what kind of ruler the true father is. So I was like, ooh, that's really bad. So I want to learn more about that, and then I want to learn more about the advancements, or just the way the world looks, if that makes sense. So at first, being in Jasminda's small town, when she goes down to town from her village, from her valley where her house is, they're only on horses, and there's like carts and stuff and dirt roads, I'm assuming. But when she gets into civilization more with Jack, there's like military vehicles, and there's electricity, and there's like paved roads. And I'm like, what is like technologically advanced, but also sprinkled with magic? Are there skyscrapers? Like, they describe the palace, but the palace looks like every palace you could think of, except like not Disney palace, but like palace, not castle, palace. So it's like, I just want a firm grasp of the world, because it was really hard for me to get their garb, how they dressed, was it more modern? Was it more fantastical? Was it somewhere in between? The architecture. I wanted to be able to step into the world and understand Jasminda's standing, and understand Jack's standing, and everything. Because come to find out, Jack is the prince regent, meaning he is basically the king instead for the queen who sleeps. When she comes back, he's no longer the king, because now she's the queen, or the prince, she's king. Because his brother dies, he's promoted to prince. So like, there's royalty, there's electric cars or gas powered cars, there are lights and electricity, and then there is magic. I just had a hard time grasping the world, is basically what I'm getting at. So with that in mind, I would love more in-depth world building. I would like to know more about the magic, because there's things about earth singing that are never talked about, like the caldera, the blood magic. Is the blood magic bad, or is the blood magic good? Because kind of the use of blood magic was frowned upon in the beginning of the story, but what saved the whole story was the use of blood magic. But also, if Earth Song is gifted to other singers, does Earth Song become stronger and permanent? Or is that just what happened when the queen gifted Jasminda more power so she can fully rule as she should as the queen of both regions? Like, I need more of a thing, of a, what's the word I'm looking for? I need more of a history or an in-depth look at earth singing, because right now it's just a really cool power that sometimes kills people and sometimes don't, because the way the true father uses it, which I'm assuming because it's tainted, he can just throw people and shatter their bones. I don't think, like, you can fly with Earth Song and you can bring people to you, but I feel like if you can't hurt or maim people with Earth Song, you shouldn't be able to fling them and then crush them into small piles of pulp. Like, I need to know the rules. What are the rules? So I had issues with that, because some things about Earth Singing, once you feel like you have a good idea of what Earth Song is, like you can suss out liars and you can feel the energy pulsing through just everything around you, and you get the great, like, you just get a good hold of it, then immediately something happens. You're like, but wait, I thought you can't use Earth Song in that way. I thought you could only use it in this way. And I just want like clarifying rules, and maybe that'll be in the second book. I don't know. But in this book, it just felt like Earth Song was very much a plot device. And it was like, blood magic's bad, but blood magic's also good because we can kill the bad guy with it, but don't use it. And gifting your song to someone else is bad, but enhancing another singer's song with your song is okay. And I was just like, maybe because I don't know the rules. So you just kind of have to let stuff happen and be like, okay. And then it kind of just ends happily ever after, the whole book, which is fine because you want Jack and Jasminda to be happily ever after, because they're literally going to die without each other. They're pretty melodramatic, but I accept that because most romance books I've read are melodramatic. So I dug that about it, and I was fine with it. But then the ending hinted that the queen just kind of flies around and surveys the land, because she abdicated her throne to Jack and Jasminda. She was like, you two will rule, because you know what they represent, the two races coming together to create a better world, you know, interracial marriage saving the world, literally. And so she was like, you two are the embodiment of peace, so you two should be king and queen of these two lands and bring them together and fix all the harm that me and my brother have caused to this land. And I will fly off into the sky and survey your process and your survey what you're doing. And then, you know, she's just going around pulling strings and hiding in the background, kind of like God, which she is kind of like God in this book. So yeah, The Song of Blood and Stone. I liked the book. I enjoyed reading the book. Sometimes it was a little too like predictable. Sometimes the plot was like, okay, let's just get to it because I know what's happening. And also sometimes it was just very convenient. Like, side note, Jasminda's aunt Vanessa, she has a girlfriend who she can't be with because same-sex things were frowned upon, so she was sent off to the nunnery to do something better with her life. And also her parents burned her because they didn't want her to shame them like her older sister Jasminda's mom did by marrying a woman and blah 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 blah. But Jasminda's girlfriend, when we needed an airship pilot in a city where airships were were extremely rare, and there was only one airship and no pilots, all of a sudden Vanessa shows up at the castle from all the way from the Mantle to here and was like, yo, my girlfriend, she can fly. You want me to call her? And she could fly us to the Mantle, and, you know, we can save this planet, save this town. That was so convenient and so unbelievable that I was just like, okay, I guess this is happening. And, you know, she flew perfectly in an airship she'd never flown before and landed through a crazy Earthsinger storm that killed the previous Prince Regent. I sat there, I mulled this over and just let it flow over me, because if you think too hard about it, you just might get a little bit annoyed by how convenient everything was. So I just let it happen. But yeah, the book can sometimes fall into weird tropes. The Untainted Virgin can be very predictable, you know, the backstory being obviously about the true father and the queen who sleeps. And, you know, predictable that Jack and Jasminda would be the keys to saving the planet. Unpredictable is that they're king and queen and that their interracial marriage will save the land. I didn't expect that. I thought they would just live happily ever in Jasminda's valley together, but maybe Jasminda let her aunt and her aunt's girlfriend live there or something from prying eyes. Who knows? The book is a good book. I want to read the second one to see if Penelope goes more in depth into the world building and earth singing and just overall what's going on, because though I liked the story, the focus was purely on Jack and Jasminda, and when the events in the story impact whole nations. So I just want to know the more political side, the more just how all this affects things. I just need to know the culture, I guess, the culture. And it will be interesting to see how this new regime will go over in Langomar and Olestra, because we saw a little bit at the end of the book that Olestrians were really upset when they found out that the queen who sleeps was black. Like, they were like, lame. We were praying to a Groll, again, don't know what that means, this whole time. I'm no longer a part of this religion, and y'all can kick rocks. And then they just left their religion. So that was interesting to see that Olestrians were already like, ew, gross. Not all of them, but a large quantity of the racist ones were like, not about this whole black queen. And now we have a black queen married to our white prince regent. Shameful. So that was really interesting, but I want to see what Langomar thinks when Olestrians come over the hill and start, trying to merge the two cultures. So I'm very excited to read the new book, and I do recommend reading the first book. It is a good, look or intro into the Earthsinger Chronicles and a good intro into the world. I do hope the second book gives us more info on what's going on, and yeah, I do recommend it. I just want everyone to know that it is a fantasy romance novel. So at the center of it is a love story, in that it still has some good battle scenes, good, interesting, fantastical elements. Earth singing is really interesting. The characters are kind of bland. If they are not Jack and Jasminda, they are paper cutouts of people. So I would like to see more character development of everyone that isn't Jack and Jasminda, because everybody else, we're just cardboard cutouts there to help further the plot along and nothing else. Anybody outside of those people were literally not important, and so their characters weren't built up to be anything but that. But the stereotypical people that they should be within the confines of this story. Yeah, but I do recommend it, even though I'm saying all of these like semi-negative things or what sound as negative. I did enjoy reading it. It is a pleasurable read. I read the first half of this book in like 3 hours. It's a page turner. It's really interesting, and the way that Penelope writes makes you want to learn more about these people, makes you want to see more of the world. So it's written really well. It's just some of the parts of it can get very repetitive. So yes, I do recommend Song of Blood and Stone. I do think you all should check it out. I will be reading the second Earthsinger Chronicles book and releasing a review for you guys. Again, I'm really sorry for the long wait for this episode. I do have a chronic illness, and sometimes it flares up and makes it really hard for me to even update you guys on what's going on, which is what happened these last 2 weeks. I wasn't able to update. I wasn't able to really get out of bed except to use the bathroom. So I'm here now, and there will be more episodes for the next couple of weeks and until the future. And yeah, thank you guys for sticking around. If you guys want to email any recommendations or any books you'd like me to read, you can email me at the Black Bibliophile at gmail.com. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can follow me on Twitter at the Black Bibliophile. I also have an Instagram where I post a lot of the new episodes and a lot of cool things there. And if you want to support the podcast, you can support me in this podcast on Patreon. All the info will be in the link below. Once I get more than about six patrons, we will be starting a book club, and all the books in the book club will be exclusive to the book club. So I will not be talking about them here on the podcast, which is kind of cool. And we'll have discussions and all of that fun stuff. Also on the Patreon, I release seasonal book lists, which I just released the fall book list, which is books to read for fall. And I also just write little essays about shorter books I've read or comics I've read that I want to talk about, but don't have enough content for me to talk about in the podcast. So there's essays, there's book lists, there will be a book club. You get episodes early. It's pretty cool. And if you guys are into it, you should check it out. So yeah, everything I mentioned in this episode will be placed in the show notes. I really did miss doing this podcast. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.